Many times you would come across a SOQL query which is long running and needs optimization, or you encounter a heap size limit exception or too many rows returned exception, or if you are starting a new implementation and you would like to write efficient SOQL queries, then this tutorial is for you. Hello everyone, welcome to this channel. If you are new here, the channel is dedicated to discuss and gain more knowledge on Salesforce concepts. Here, we are discussing concepts which will make us write better SOQL queries. So when does a query become a selective query? To understand this concept, you need to know few things related to queries. There are two types of filters in SOQL from query optimizer's perspective. One is a simple filter. So in this filter, there is a field expressions which is combined with AND operator. A field expression is nothing but a field, an operator, and a value. Example for this, city equals to Delhi and country equals to India. When this filter is used in a SOQL query, it becomes a simple filter. The second type of filter is composite filter. Here, a field expression is combined with OR operator. So example is city equals to Delhi or country equals to India. And when this kind of filter is used in a SOQL query, then it becomes a composite filter. So the next concept that we need to understand is, when does a standard field have an index? If it is a primary key, or if it is a foreign key, or if it is an audit field, then that standard field have an index. Example for such field is ID, name, owner ID for primary keys, and created by ID, last modified by ID for foreign keys, and created date, system mod stamp for audit fields. Now, when does a custom field have an index? If they have been marked as a unique or external ID, or when the field is requested to have an index with the help of Salesforce support team. So you can also request Salesforce support team to have a custom field as an index. What is the threshold value for optimizing a SOQL query? A threshold value is the number of records written by the filter beyond which the index field is not considered for optimization. So imagine this as a number of records beyond which a query optimizer does not consider index for optimization. We will understand this with an example query in the next slides. This table gives an example of calculating the threshold value. Consider that a table has a total of 3 lakh records, then 90,000 records is the threshold for considering the standard index. Similarly, 30,000 records is the standard or a threshold for considering custom index. This is an example query. Here we have a simple filter, created date is equals to this year and vehicle status is equals to available. Now this table shows the total number of active records, the threshold for standard index, and the threshold for custom index. Now to understand this, we need to break the filter into two partial queries. The first query is based on the created date equals to this year, and the second one is on the vehicle status equals to available. We are breaking the query into two partial queries here. Now, for the first partial query, when created date is equals to this year, the total number of records is 1,04,567 records. And this number is greater than the threshold which is calculated in the previous slide, which is 98,907. So this field cannot be considered for query optimization, and hence the query becomes not selective. Now, let's take the example of second partial query. Here, the total number of records returned is 24,397, and this number is less than the threshold for custom index, and hence this field is considered for optimization and the query becomes selective. Here, the assumption is the vehicle status is a custom index, and this filter would be selective filter, and hence the SOQL query would be selective. So when a query is not selective, when the query is not having index field in the filter, or when the query has an index field in the filter, however, the number of records returned by that filter is exceeding the threshold, or when querying with a wildcard or starts with filter on a large text field. Here is one example where a query is run on the case object and the filter criteria is description like some text. This becomes a not selective query. Now, the next concept that we are talking about is SOQL for loop in Apex code. What happens when your SOQL query returns many S objects? It will either exceed limit on heap size, you will get a governor limit on heap size, or it can cause a runtime exception. So example, the below query can cause runtime exception, that is too many query rows. That is because we don't have any filter used in this query. To resolve this, we need to use SOQL for loop instead, since it can process multiple batches of records. There are two variations for using SOQL for loop. The below variation is when you don't have any DML to be performed within the for loop. And when you have a DML to be performed in the for loop, you need to use this syntax. Here, notice that we are declaring a contact as list of contacts compared to the previous example where we declared it as a single S object. This is one example of using a for loop that's used to mass update records. In this example, we are querying the contact records and we are looping through each of the contact, and we have a condition here where first name equals to Barbara and last name equals to Gordon. If the condition matches, then we are updating the last name as Wayne and finally performing a DML operation. Here are some example SOQL queries to understand selectivity further. In the first query, the where clause is on indexed field ID. If the number of IDs in the list are less and if it returns fewer records than the selectivity threshold, the index on ID is considered. The index is typically used when the list of IDs contains only a fewer records. In the second query, we have two filters. The first one is name is not equals to null, and the second one is custom field equals to value. So we need to consider individually what is the number of records that these filters return. If it is less than the threshold value, then that field will be used for optimization and the query becomes selective. In the third example, we have a filter where name is not equals to null. Even though name is a primary field and account is a big object which can return a lot of records, and hence this query becomes not selective. Thank you for tuning in. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more Salesforce insights. We'll be back soon with another video to dive deeper into the world of Salesforce. Until then, keep learning, exploring, and elevating your skills. See you in the next one.